Welcome, everyone, to one of our last presentations for this academic year, and certainly something that is a very strong interest to me, given my own music tastes back in uh, high school and college days. Um, but I think most of you have been here before. Get some new faces. Pretty much it's fairly straightforward. John is here today, and he's going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to him. Uh, so generally, if you have a comment that you would like us to read out loud, just drop it in the chat. You can type in "read" in all caps before what you want to be read out loud. And questions, I believe, if you have a technical question, you can sort of ask it during the presentation. Otherwise, if you could save all the questions to the end, definitely leave enough time for a little bit of Q&A. So great. I don't want to, hold on. We do have something to be read. Oh, really excited to be here. I'm from Northern California, was diagnosed with autism a couple years ago, and have been a metalhead since I was 12. Yeah, the horns. Awesome. All right, cool, cool. All right, I think a lot of us already share a lot in common, so this is going to be fun. Um, okay, John, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Happy to be here and want to thank doctors Don Prince-Hughes and Dr. Roger Ju for creating this group and you know creating this community, gathering everybody around, and I think it's a really great scenario. I'm happy to be part of it today. And I know, just following it as best I can, I think the group does tackle a lot of like really interesting and serious issues. Um, a lot of things that I think they're really practical advice and helpful things for people to learn about in their everyday life. And I think this presentation is a little bit more like abstract. It's not so like concrete in terms of like what will how will this specifically help you. I know, this is a time maybe when, there's a lot of kind of terrible things going on in the world, and this is kind of like an abstract thing. Maybe it seems a little bit far-fetched, but I do think like the study of like autistic perception, the study of autistic experience is really important. And so this is kind of like one way we can get at that, autism and heavy metal music. It's sort of like one possible sort of research avenue to get at that. So anyway, so this is my topic, and it's really great to be here. It's also great to be in a space where we can talk about my own experiences with autism. It's definitely not the case in other forums. So I'm really glad that have that freedom here to be able to talk about that. And so anyway, just to introduce myself, I'm John Fessenden, and I teach at the Mississippi University for Women. I'm assistant professor of music therapy. But really there, I'm kind of like a jack of all trades. I'll teach music history, music theory, guitar, and music therapy, of course. So that's sort of where I'm at. I've been there since about 2021. Okay, so moving on, this is kind of like my outline, just to give folks uh, expectations on what's going to happen. So first, just kind of an introduction. That's probably this part, and then talking about just defining the terms autism and heavy metal, two terms that have been debated over the years. And then I'd like to talk a little about what I call resonant forms. Um, and this is this idea that autism, certain like modes of perception we might think of in autism may be sort of accommodating towards certain types of music, or certain types of music may accommodate certain forms of perception. Maybe think about it that way. But so this idea of resonance, like heavy metal and autism, is there some kind of like a resonance between that? I kind of talk about that. That's my sort of like where I wrote my dissertation. And then sort of a more recent topic that I've been looking at is posthumanism and how you can apply that ideas of posthumanism to both heavy metal and autism, and if it's possible to, have both a posthumanistic view of metal and autism and how they can sort of enrich each other, possibly, or something like that. So I'll get to that towards the end. That's going to be the last part I talk about. Okay, so the first part, I guess, is going to be the introduction. And I'm going to talk a little bit about myself more. And I'm always a little bit self-conscious when I talk about myself. And I don't, I don't want to go drone on about it. But what's true is that my personal life and my research are really intertwined. Like there's really no getting around it. Like if I'm going to talk about my research and my experiences with heavy metal, they sort of go together because how I thought about my life after I was diagnosed with autism in my early 30s. Um, and sort of heavy metal played a kind of an important role in sort of my, that transition period. So anyway, so let me talk a little bit about my personal life, my personal journey, my personal musical journey, just because what you'll see is it's gonna flow directly into my research and sort of how I created my research program. So anyway, so I was having fun thinking about back when I first, got interested in music, and music was something where it was something at school where I wasn't really interested in it when we were given the recorder, so I wasn't really interested in that. I sang in a church choir for a couple years. It really didn't capture my imagination or interest. Um, and then we're talking about like sort of the early 90s. Um, I started noticing, some of my classmates, they started showing interest in music. Like someone gave me a Gin Blossoms tape for one of my birthdays. I remember that for some reason. And I remember once going to a summer camp, and a kid had a tape of Nirvana's Nevermind, and they were just playing that over and over and over again. So for some reason, I guess I remember at this age, I just started becoming more like aware of music and having like an interest in it. Not necessarily liking some of the things people were playing, but sort of like gaining that awareness. Um, and it is also very interesting to think about back then. Back then, this would be like early 90s. And it was really hard to access. I just remember like music was not everywhere like it is now. Like I can't just, you couldn't really just find it. You can't just go on the internet and look something up and then find a bunch of bands like that. It was really kind of, I remember it was a kind of mysterious kind of realm that I had to sort of figure out what was going on in there. And so I remember just putting the radio on late at nights and just keep listening to music and searching for things that I wanted to hear. Um, and the thing that really just caught me was the song I do remember specifically was "Crazy Train" by Ozzy Osbourne, and it really was just like it just captured it. There's something that's very sort of brilliant about it, and sort of powerful about it, but also technical and precise and expressive about it. Um, I just remember hearing this song. And they said it's "Crazy Train" by Ozzy, and I didn't know what Ozzy was. I thought it was a band, or I didn't know that was a person. But eventually, this kind of like spurred my interest and sort of figured out how to learn more about different music, and metal was really my first love. Um, and I just have a recording here just so people. I want to make sure. I'm not sure everybody here is like knows a lot about metal, or if someone's like a little bit more a novice. I want to make sure I'm explaining everything clearly. So, Crazy Train, this is just a part of the solo. This is the solo of Crazy Train that transitions back into the riff. And to me, the sort of technical playing and expression was really just blew me away at this age, and it still does, honestly. When I listen to it, it still is like a perfect little bit of music for me. So this is what that sounds like. Oh, here we go. So there's Crazy Train, solo of Crazy Train. Um, and it was also interesting just to think about the time at the early 90s that all the radio was playing alternative music and grunge music. And so I don't know. I felt like that really sort of rich, fast and high, kind of sparkly kind of music was really kind of an interesting contrast. I thought to sort of like that grunge and alternative era, and it really sort of locked me in. So anyway, I became interested in music. I was asked my parents for a guitar for my birthday, and they got that, so I started playing heavy metal, learning guitar. And what eventually happened was, I became interested in other things. I was studying with a jazz professor, jazz guitar teacher, and I learned jazz, and I love jazz. And then I went off to college to be a jazz guitar performance major. Um, and really, I think, I don't want to say I became like snobbish or about metal, but I definitely felt like, like I was studying more sophisticated things, and I definitely abandoned metal as I sort of went to school, and kept on going. Uh, I went to grad school later on to study composition, but really, I sort of, was alienated from metal for a little while. Then, 20s happened to me. I was the kind of autistic person where I did well for myself through undergraduate school, and then once I had to go into the real world, I just completely fell apart, and it was really not a good situation in my 20s. I had lots of mental health problems. I went through sort of the stages of being diagnosed with a bunch of different things. First, depression, panic disorder, anxiety, OCD, and then later ADHD, which I think was more close, and then later autism, um, which was I was at the this is when it was Asperger syndrome, so I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. Um, and um, and this was kind of like a moment where I was looking back along my life and thinking about things like why did I do this, why did I make this decision, why did I choose doing these things and other things. And I really felt like metal was like a key kind of component of something that it was part of me. And masking or whatnot, I decided I sort of shed it. I didn't really want it anymore at a certain age, but really but now, I mean, now I keep on revisiting it. I keep on coming back to it. I understand now it's a lifelong thing that I'm always going to love heavy metal, and it's not. I sort of see myself as kind of having a wayward period there a little bit where I was maybe like snobbish about it. But so for me, metal has this important part in my life. It's not just music I listen to, but I consider it's kind of like a core part of my being that I lost and rediscovered at a certain point. Um, anyway, so that's a little bit about sort of my history with metal, and I'll talk a little bit more about my history in music in a little bit later. But now I'd just like to define some terms. The first term is going to be autism, and I'm not going to define it, unfortunately. I'm going to just say generally, I recognize all the discourse around autism and understand a lot about it, and I think I'm guessing everybody here is probably pretty firmly in the neurodiversity camp of understanding things and being skeptical of medical models, these sort of ways of characterizing things. Um, so I'm definitely someone who will give a lot of credence to the movement, neurodiversity movement, and the political positions it takes um, regarding language, regarding therapy, types of therapy, whatnot. Um, but I do as a neurodiversity, I do give credence to the neuro part of it and have a respect for the scientific understanding of the autistic mind and so forth. And there I'm trapped in two worlds. I'm an autistic person. I'm also a clinician, and I do constantly think about what is the most ethical form of treating neurodivergent clients. Um, and that's the topic for another another day, I think. It's more of a clinical issue than specific musical issue. So, I'm not going to make any definitions, but the one thing I'm going to recognize is we autistic people are a heterogeneous population. So there might be times when I'm making comments about a group of us, right? I never want to I never want to imply that what happens for one, it happens for all, right? I want to give credit for that individuality for each one of us. Um, so if my language sometimes slides a little bit, you can catch me and call me out on that. I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, but so I sometimes want to talk about groups of autistic people, right? Subgroups, things like that. So I want to recognize the heterogeneity, but also think about similarities among us. And the one thing I have right here, a sensory term. I'm really interested in some of the literature that has really sought to sort of like recenter autism. We understand it clinically. It's diagnosed as a social disorder and a behavioral disorder. But I think if you're looking at some of the literature, thinking about autism as a kind of like a sensory, think about autism from a sensory first perspective, understanding how sensory differences can affect social and behavior, things like that. That to me, that's a really like intriguing and hopeful path that people can go down. Is trying to really highlight this sort of sensory aspects of autism, and sort of highlight how that sort of conditions our everyday experience as we go about doing things. So anyway, and that sort of leads a little bit into my research as well. Let's focus on the sensory. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about heavy metal after talking about autism, and again, this might seem kind of basic for some people, but maybe I'm gonna give a twist on like what is heavy metal. That might some people might also think interesting. So, um, heavy metal is kind of an interesting term to study, like the actual history of the term. If you look into like what is heavy metal music in the 70s, it's the term is used a little bit differently than it is like later in the 80s and 90s. In the 70s, heavy metal is really like an adjective. They're sort of like saying it kind of like sounds like heavy metal, right? Like this, so it's not a genre yet, right? But so we can have groups such as Led Zeppelin, who can have songs that sound like heavy metal, and they have songs that sound like a country song or a or a blues song, or et cetera, right? So heavy metal has this sort of like it's a kind of like a style, under as a sort of under rock music, right? As a sort of like a style that rock bands will kind of use. Um, and then later on, I think what happens is, we have a sort of like a crystallization of what heavy metal is in the 1980s, and 90s. And here you have bands, right? Metallica, Iron Maiden. The metal is baked into the the band title, right? So there's like a sort of like a different there's a different shift in terms of how do people understand what heavy metal is. Um, and I'm going to sort of like talk about a very specific, sort of narrow definition of heavy metal, because a lot of heavy definitions of heavy metal would include bands such as Led Zeppelin, which would include bands such as like Van Halen, um, and other people would consider those like hard rock music, right? Like is there a meaningful difference between hard rock and heavy metal? And this has been debated among people. I think it's an interesting debate, fun debate if you like debating genre categories. Sure, I think there's good stuff there, um, but what I think is interesting is, um, if you have this sort of like lean conception of heavy metal, where you sort of exclude hard rock, then you sort of have one where you have this sort of, you can see it down here. I have it's a, kind of like a timeline. So you have sort of like traditional heavy metal being developed in the 1970s. Then you have this new wave of British heavy metal here in the late 70s. And then you have sort of speed metal and thrash metal developing in the 1980s. Then below this, you have sort of like more peripheral genres that are sort of similar to heavy metal. And like here, of course, glam metal, right? That's a term. Why am I excluding glam metal from the metal genre? People could argue with that. And my basic approach to that is just trying to think about the themes of heavy metal, and this specifically like what kind of lyrical themes, can be used sort of to define the genre. Um, and sorry, I'm going to go back here. Um, and so one of the things that sort of find is that, the sort of lean, sort of strict heavy metal definition, the themes are very serious, they're dark, they're sort of introspective, often about alienation. And hard rock is really a lot of the music can be about sort of like sexual conquest. It's about sort of social competence and sort of like being able to do whatever you want. Dionysian is something that has been used to term to describe the sort of hard rock, glam metal kind of like attitude. And that's very different from like the sort of traditional sort of Black Sabbath or thrash kind of dark centered, not really enjoying things, but really thinking about the sort of malevolent forces you can think about in our world. So I'm going to sort of like use this sort of like lean definition and exclude um, the sort of hard rock and sort of glam metal sort of definitions, just because we get these much more sort of narrower themes. And from my perspective, from an autistic perspective, these themes have a lot more resonance than sort of being sort of like a social master and, having all these other people of the opposite sex always attracted to you and, basically living your best life all the time and having no consequences happening of it. That's not really what I consider as being, sort of metal. So here are some of those themes we talked about: the absence or destruction of relationships, right? So problems with relationships, alienation and isolation, and there can be sort of positive manifestations in terms of heroic quests, exploring fictional worlds, science fiction worlds, supernatural phenomenon, little hope or faith in authorities, due to incompetence or indifference, assumption that society is uncaring, unconcerned, fixations on death, violence, Satan, alternate ways to conceptualize the self, the beast, and the robot, and coping with mental instability, anxiety, depression, a community of outsiders. So that's just those themes. And then for some music examples, just to sort of make sure everybody's sort of on the same page here. Like I have three early examples of what we might consider like heavy metal versus hard rock. So the first one I believe is going to be hard rock. Is going to be A Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin. So this has some metal characteristics. It has like this kind of driving beat, heavy sort of distorted guitar. But the theme, right, is really going to be more about sexual conquest and whatnot. And it's a more sort of kind of like playful sort of theme. You need cooling, baby, I'm not fooling. Right, so just an example there. Probably everybody knows that one. Then another one probably everybody knows, but just to show the difference would be a Led Zeppelin Immigrant Song, right? So this is Led Zeppelin, if they're not a heavy metal group per se, wrote a song that I think a lot of people do consider in the heavy metal canon, Immigrant Song. Well, why is that different from A Whole Lot of Love? Well, this is a little bit more of a sort of serious theme. It's sort of like Vikings going out, exploring the world, and musically it's a little bit more, it's a little bit less bluesy, a little bit more austere in terms of the intervals and the in terms of the main riff that's being used. So this would be an example of Led Zeppelin, not hard rock, but more in the sort of heavy metal sort of version of it. So, so that would be sort of example of heavy metal by Led Zeppelin, and then maybe more of a sort of traditional classic heavy metal would be Black Sabbath. Here you can hear even sort of like thicker distortion on the guitars, kind of that more driving rhythm, also down-tuned strings to sort of create even lower, darker sounds. So this would be sort of like a more pure heavy metal and sort of lean understanding of it. Also, three examples. So hopefully the those terms are relatively clear. Um, and yeah, so I was going through here some more sort of classic examples of those themes, right? Black Sabbath Paranoid. This would probably be if we consider, like if there's a year and a birth of heavy metal, it would probably be 1970 with Black Sabbath. But anyway, these songs, um, they do have that very sort of negative social attitude about them. So very sort of an alienated sort of outlook, right? Make a joke and I will sigh, and you will laugh and I will cry. Happiness I cannot feel, and love to me is so unreal, right? But there's this idea where there's like something missing between us, right, in terms of our conversation that's going on, right? So here's that.
Make a joke and I will sigh and you will laugh and I will cry. Happiness I cannot feel and love to me is so
Okay, so there it goes. Paranoid. And then the other sort of side of that one is going to be Iron Man from the same album right there. Iron Man, well, maybe one of the most famous riffs of sort of early classic metal. But anyway, here you have, he was talks about this it's kind of like a science fiction sort of story, right? This person who has sort of passed through time, who's kind of like a hero to mankind, but turned into iron, and then everybody just passes him by. No one sort of pays attention to him anymore. So again, this idea of the world passing you by, very sort of powerful lyrics for people who maybe feel that social isolation is a part of their life.
he was turned to steel in the great magnetic field when he traveled time for the future of mankind. Nobody wants him. He just stares at the world.
There we go. All right, so some heavy metal classics there. And so then if we were to just kind of like review what is sort of like traditional heavy metal style, can we say what exactly is this about? I have sort of these categories as primary sort of. It has to have a distorted guitar, use of power chords, modal riffs, sometimes we call modular form, episodic structure. The use of palm muting um, as a sort of rhythmic technique to sort of you have power chords as a sort of a more rich sound and palm muting as a more percussive kind of a sound. And the rhythm in traditional heavy metal is pretty, I would say, I would describe it as relatively simple. You're using, it's mostly subdivisions, and you're not having a lot of variety in terms of durations. Usually the music is going to be, quarter note boom or eighth note boom boom or 16th note boom 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 boom, right? Like it's going to have these sort of relatively predictable subdivisions in this sort of like traditional sort of heavy metal style. Okay. Still defining terms, we're just going to go on a little bit and just talk about what happened to metal after 1990. Generally speaking, what happens is that there's a movement called extreme metal. And it's really, I mean, that's a book by Keith Con Harris. Um, and it's really kind of like a collection of groups. But what happened is that, in the 80s, metal was definitely commercially popular. And at a certain point, it just sort of like goes underground and you have more sort of like music that is not necessarily as pleasing to the ear, but you have very successful communities and scenes that develop out of these new styles. So, death metal, doom metal, black metal, groove metal, and I have gent here to sort of suggest that groove metal indicates a increasing rhythmic complexity in metal, and gent is sort of like a style that really takes that to the sort of next stage in that development. And then metalcore as well. Metalcore can be kind of like a hybrid genre, and then you have all sorts of like hybrid genres as well. You can have deathcore, pirate black metal, or whatever. You can sort of combine all sorts of metals, progressive and whatnot, to sort of create different combinations. Um, But yeah, so here just an example for, oh, this is just going to be an example of thrash metal, just to sort of like give an example of on our way to extreme metal. So we heard traditional metal. There's going to be thrash metal, which is going to sort of up the ante in terms of speed, dissonance, and these sort of elements of the music. And this is going to sort of end up leading towards extreme metal. So here's Metallica, Battery, thrash metal.
Flashing up the action, returning the reaction. We gon' rip the torn away. Hypnotizing power, pressing on the cower. Battery is here to stay. Smashing through the boundaries, lunacy and boundary. Cannot stop the battery.
Okay, so there we go. Thrash, sort of like our sort of stepping stone, I think of on the way to sort of extreme metal. This is I just like to make sometimes little charts if this helps people or not, maybe not. But here you can sort of like see the timeline down here, 70s, 80s, 90s. And so like the first half of this is sort of like traditional heavy metal. So heavy metal, new wave of British heavy metal, speed thrash. And then you have black doom, death, groove, metalcore, gent sort of emerging later on. So just a way, if you want a sort of visual way to conceptualize that, that's a chart right there. Um, And then so we could clarify what are some of aspects of extreme metal, some of the things we'll find there. Now it is a pretty heterogeneous group of music, but one of the most clear ones is going to be vocal distortion, harsh vocals. Some people call it Cookie Monster vocals, right? The idea that we're not singing anymore, we're kind of like creating sounds with our mouths that are, more noise maybe than melody in our traditional sense. But of course, for some people that might be perfectly melodic as well. So yeah, so we have this idea of vocal distortion, changing tempo as well. That's something you'll find in sort of death metal. So I'll first play just examples of this so you can hear sort of like examples of that extreme metal. I think this one is Death. Uh, yeah, the genre death metal is named after, well, a band named Death, just to clarify. I think this is Death.
There is a mass. Covers up what's true and attention. Once removed, things become very clear. Analyze behavior. Fighting suicide beneath the person that is presented to you.
So there's one that's Death. Another very famous vocalist of this style is Cannibal Corpse. I'll just play a little excerpt here. You can hear it even with the first one, you can still make out some of the words, right? And here with Cannibal Corpse, it's very difficult to. There we go. And that's from Ace Ventura. If you missed that one, Cannibal Corpse played in that movie. Okay, and then this last example right here, where I'm talking about a little bit about groove metal. So before I talked about how traditional metal had a kind of like very straightforward rhythmic component to it. Groove metal adds a lot more syncopations to the music. It gives a little bit more sort of I'd say there's more durational variety in terms of the kind of like the beats that are created. And this sort of like opens things a lot, makes music can be a little bit more sort of popular sounding, but can also introduce more rhythmic complexity to it. So this would be Pantera, I believe. Just example of syncopation. If you know what syncopation is, it's just the idea that if this is the beat, sometimes we're going to play music, we're going to play music, play something not on the beat. So this idea like that. So here we go. All right, so that hopefully is my overview, defining terms, heavy metal, and I'm going to return to some of these topics a little bit later. But as of now, I'm going to leave them for now. Okay, so now I want to get into the idea of resonance and resonant forms. And part of this is just going to be, so I published this article, not article, chapter, published last year in this book right here, Heavy Metal and Disability, Crypts, Crowds, and Cacophonies. And so I wrote this thing about autistic hearing and heavy metal aesthetics. There's the book title. I think it's a pretty cool title. Cover. Um, and this is so this is kind of like my attempt to sort of like link autistic perception and heavy metal. And I really like this idea of resonance. And it's something I first took from Nancy, this French philosopher, but I ended up not really liking that concept as much as I liked it from this Canadian philosopher named Jan Zwicky, who talks about resonance and resonant forms. So here, just a couple of quotes, like in lyric experience, we're open to the world. Resonance does not originate with us, but proceeds through us from the world. So this idea that there are things out there in the world, right, that are going to sort of resonate. We're attuned to them in a certain way. And sort of in this book, there's sort of quotations on different pages, but so this idea, the concept of a style does not correspond to an historical fact, but answers a need. It creates a mode of understanding. So this idea of like, this is kind of like interesting to me also, right? It's like the idea of, if we consider metal, right? Like we needed metal and people created metal to meet that need, right? Like we were sort of aching for that sort of form of expression to resonate with us. I kind of like that. And here's just another quote of what is a resonant form. Form that is the result of attunement or integration of multiple aspects, constituents, or parts. In the physical case of a resonance body, a vibration in one component will set off vibrations throughout the structure. In a resonant ideational structure, images, sounds, word meanings, and connotations, etymologies, emotional associations, tone, color, etc., will be attuned in this way. So I don't know. So there's some philosophical ideas. I'm still kind of working my way through them. I think they're cool ideas, but I'm happy to talk about them more. But so I'm trying to think about if heavy metal and autism as being sort of resonance. And so to talk a little bit more about sort of my own personal history. So I kind of like developed this research program to study autism, what I call like autistic musicality. And it's really like a concepts based on like autistic hearing and listening. And the ideas here I got from a couple of theorists, music theorists, Joseph Strauss, Dave Headlam, John Kuchavi, I believe, a couple of them. And in around 2000, 2010, they came up with these theories of like autistic listening. Like, what is it like to hear from from an autistic perspective? And it's kind of like an interesting project, and so it caused me to sort of like look back into the history of this, like who else has talked about autistic hearing and listening. And so this is a lot in my dissertation and a paper I have. But the idea is it really people have talked about autism in music since like the original writings on autism, like Leo Kanner in 1943 is writing about the autistic the music created by his autistic subjects there. And and I think in the 70s, there's an author who talks about autistic musicality. And at that point, it was something that they wanted to eradicate, right? They say, oh, this person, he plays music, he plays music autistically. We want him to play music not autistically, right? We want him to play music normally. Um, and so when we come back to this idea of autistic hearing with these music theorists, it's really within a disability studies framework. We're not judging. We're saying, is there a difference in how autistic people hear, and does that affect how they experience music and how they perform music and make music and compose music or improvise? Well, that's that sort of thing. Um, so this is sort of like my research project, and to come back to a little bit about myself, because like I said, myself led to a lot of research. My um like I sort of look back on my life to see like what did I do well and what did I not do well musically, right? Like, and it turns out like there's certain things like I had really good dictation, like I could write down whatever I heard, but I had bad sight reading, so I couldn't translate music live like in time, and I am a professor now of music, so you can make it to a music professor without being good at sight reading at all. Um, but it's a lifelong struggle. It's just I think it's a sensory temporal sort of issue of processing speed, being able to translate certain things into certain gestures. It's not easy for me. But so anyway, so I went back and kind of like looked on my life and thought about all these different, musical decisions I made. What was I good at? What was I bad at? And I found like I had this sort of imbalance, right? I was better at things relating to like pitch, but I had difficulty relating to things relating to time. And when I ended up looking at all this literature on music, like auditory processing and autism, you find that yes, it turns out autistic people score better on tests of pitch perception. And when you look at time and rhythm, the results are inconsistent and they're very mixed. So a couple results are high, so some are about where the sort of NTs are, and some are below those areas. And I don't mean to talk about things in deficits, right? But if I can talk about pitch perception being a strength, we can talk about sort of temporal experience being inconsistent, right? Maybe that sort of way. And again, I don't want to make judgments, because there are some autistic people with unbelievable senses of rhythm, and I'm not one of them, but they're definitely out there, and it's again heterogeneous groups, right? We're not try to think about totalizing, how people are. But these 10 trends were really interesting to me. Like, okay, so strong in pitch, weak in time, and that sort of shaped my choices, like or like what I could do, like as a musician, and so what I ended up doing. Um, there are also issues with texture, form, and emotion. I won't talk too much about that right now, but I came up with this idea of like spectral hearing as sort of like this idea of some people who are maybe autistic hear the pitch better than and they're not engaged with rhythm. Okay. And so what I said, talk about resonance. Well, when we talked about what is like traditional heavy metal, distortion and power chords are these incredibly rich sounds, from a spectral perspective. If people sort of don't know the mechanics of it, what makes an instrument's timbre are the sort of overtones, that sort of ring out from the vibrations of the instrument. And distortion, the process of distortion, really magnifies all these overtones, these partials, to an extreme degree. So that's what sort of like creates the sort of classic distortion sound used in sort of heavy metal. So you have this incredibly, in my opinion, like rich sounds, and I like still to this day, like if I'm just in a room and I hear somebody hit a power chord with crunch on it, I'm just like, whoa, like I like that sound, like it has like a impact on me sensorily, right? Like it affects me, and it snaps my attention to it as well. And then yet heavy metal has this really simple rhythmic profile I was talking about before. This is traditional classic heavy metal. Sort of sparse texture, riff-paced form, and then we went over the themes as well, right? All those kind of themes. And here's I think this is Am I Evil? Yeah, just a reminder of how all these sort of sounds like work together.
The mother was a
yeah, anyway, so, um, so this is where I got this idea. So yeah, resonant forms, heavy metal, and traditional heavy metal, and sort of this idea of spectral hearing. And so now things change. Now I'm gonna so that's kind of like the first idea I had. Now this idea of posthumanism kind of like completely um, changes some of what I'm talking about because um, sorry, I'm just going over here. Oh, I just want to make one more point about this, um, especially about the rhythm. Like one of the things about the rhythm is that you know, it's hard for me. Maybe it was, especially when I was younger, it was hard for me to feel like entrained with the music. But it means like it's hard for me to feel the beat of the music for that music to sort of carry me on. And so heavy metal, it almost does this for me because first of all, it's often played loud, right? Most people are playing heavy metal loud, and it has that sort of simple rhythmical component to it. So it really kind of like it feels like it's sort of like it's a kind of like a prosthetic, like it kind of like takes over my body and it can kind of lock me into these rhythms that I maybe would not be able to feel otherwise. Like if I'm just listening to jazz, where you have like more like a subdued bass line, like hi hat. It's a much different sort of visceral feeling than sort of being locked into the song heavy metal wise. And so in a way, it sort of like teaches me how to be rhythmical with sort of by sort of like having so much overwhelming force in terms of that sort of power, the sound volume, and sort of driving simplicity to it. So that's one thing. And another thing that's always fun to think about is also headbanging, right? Headbanging is used for autism clinicians and it's used for heavy metal fans. It's you might think, oh, it's funny that that word is used in both situations, right? And I don't mean to make light of headbanging. Obviously, that self-injurious behavior is not a joke, and I don't mean to make fun of that. But if when I go to a heavy, I haven't really been to too many heavy metal shows. I'm not really into to that to the you know to the scene too much, um, but it's just very curious to me where I feel like everybody's just like in their own world, bang their head, and somebody's next to me banging head. It's kind of like a mutual dance that we're all doing in isolation with each other. And then you have the mosh pit too, right? So I consider the mosh pit. It's like the 10% of the hyposensitive people who really need to ram into each other. And then other people who are more into their own world can sort of be in their head banging space. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts there on resonance, rhythm, headbanging. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about posthumanism and extreme metal. So and I know I'm 50 minutes. I'm kind of taking my time here, but I'll try to wrap this up as soon as I can. Um, okay, so posthumanism. Now, this is something I don't consider myself an expert on, but I've tried to learn about recently. Um, the idea of in sort of like Western philosophy, the idea of human beings being sort of independent, autonomous, especially like the human mind, right? Rene Descartes, I think therefore I am, right? The mind has sort of like this autonomy and this human subject has this centrality. And posthumanism is sort of this idea that we're trying to get away from this idea of that. But in multiple ways, in one ways we can say, well, human beings have always been interconnected with animals and with technology, machines. And another way you can do it is understanding humans as animals and machines. So it's not necessarily even what we are different, but we are one of these kinds of things. We don't want to so we want to like highlight that. We don't necessarily want to run away from that. Um, these ideas right here. Now, with autism, there's some interesting literature on this already. And we know, Stuart Murray has this article about 12 years ago. And we know there's all sorts of awful things written about autistic people as machines, right? I have from Bettelheim to Baron Cohen. Bruno Bettelheim is one of the chief offenders of early authors who wrote some not accurate things about autism. I think did some harm with that. But Bettelheim he had a case study about Joey. He called him a mechanical boy. Joey the Mechanical Boy from 1959. So very early on, autistic people are portrayed as machines. We all know that. And then Baron Cohen probably, he has the systemizing, empathizing duality, um, which is it's not calling people machines, but it's kind of like trending that way, right? If you say something is more systematic than empathetic, you think of that more as a robot than a human, right? But then you also have these interesting representations of autistic people as sort of more animalistic, kind of like sensory dominant, right? Like we're sort of like responsive and kind of like emotional, but um, and there's obviously very famous examples of animal empathy with gorillas and cows, Temple Grandin and me with my dog and every a lot of people um, there's a pretty strong connection there as well. This idea that autistic people have this sort of animal connection. So I think there's kind of like an interesting tension in these ideas, like considering the post-human and autism, like I like the idea of reclaiming ideas, like sometimes I do want to think about myself as a machine. Like when I have a thing to write, I think of myself as like a text bot. I'm creating text to fulfill this abstract or this journal thing. Um, and but it's a very harmful way to think about it, right? Or it's like a dehumanizing way to think about people also, so to call them machines, right? It's not the same thing with animals. So I think it's kind of like an interesting tightrope to walk when you're talking about post-humanism and autism. But definitely, I think that both understanding us as sort of like connected to animals and machine-like. I mean, there's something there, and we have to be careful about it. I'll say that for now. And now I'd like to talk about posthumanism and extreme metal, because this is sort of like how I got interested in this topic. Is extreme metal to me was, uh, as I mentioned before, like I liked metal in the early '90s, and I went away from metal for a long time, and then I kind of like rediscovered it later on. And and extreme metal, I would not always get into music with harsh vocals. And it sort of like took me a while. But one of the things that just noticed about the music was, on the one hand, it's becoming like the vocals, especially, are becoming more animalistic, more sort of beast-like, and you literally have pig squeals being used by certain vocalists, right? It's going full at it in terms of the vocalist as an animal. And then the rhythm becomes almost more machine-like. It becomes more strict and austere, but complex and multi-layered. Maybe not, yeah, not austere, but multi-layered and precise. So you really have this kind of like idea of like the beast encaged in a machine in this sort of sense. And to me, it has this heavy metal became less resonant with my sensory perception, but in a way it became more representative of autistic being, insofar it has this sort of like beast machine sort of hybridity to it. Maybe I'll just play a couple of examples as an example, but first technical death metal, necrophagist. Again, hard to understand the lyrics, but a very sort of technically crafted rhythm and guitar section as well, sort of encage the beast. Right, so there's one example, and then another, Meshuggah, very famous band, pioneering djent style. Again, you can hear that really polyrhythmic kind of style here, where we have sort of multiple rhythms going on at the same time and highly syncopated. Right, it's hard to find the one unless you're listening to the symbol. I believe the symbol's on the one, but the guitar and bass are sort of hard to track the beat. we go. So again, fully heard that sort of complexity, rigidity. To me, yeah, it has that sort of machine and beast qualities to it. So anyway, um, concluding thoughts. So okay, yeah, just want to make sure. Yes, reiterating, but yes. So yeah, extreme metal, less resonant from a sensory perspective, but maybe more resonant from a symbolic or representative perspective on autism, right? That's just kind of ideas that I'm kicking around and I'm trying to figure out. Okay. Concluding thoughts, more Janswicki, in pointing to resonance among internal structural relations, a metaphor not only heightens our awareness of the echoes between things, but by drawing attention to the internal structural relations that make things the way they are, it also heightens our awareness of the things themselves. We experience more profoundly what each thing is. So to me, that autism and heavy metal have that capacity to sort of mutually enrich each other like that. Concluding thoughts was just a couple more videos right there, but we don't have to do them because one full hour. So, okay, so I'm going to wrap up my presentation there. So, thank you very much. I didn't time it. Hour is a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I'm happy to answer any questions or keep the discussion going with all of y'all. So, thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much. That was uh I couldn't stop smiling and bobbing my head. So I can't say that for any other talk we've ever hosted here. So I think a lot of people would agree. I saw a lot of head bobbing in the audience here, and references to mosh pit. I think that the chat was kind of the our equivalent to the mosh pit. Lot of positive energy there. So thanks so much. Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I will say that uh, there's no hard stop. Generally, uh, if people want to stay a little bit longer, it's totally fine. It's really also based on your availability, John. But I did want to say that what really struck me here is, I think when we're at a certain age, when we're maybe getting into this kind of music, uh, it's it almost feels like it we don't really choose it. It kind of chooses us, and then we're not sure like why we gravitate towards certain things. We just kind of do, and we just follow sort of our senses. Um, and there's a lot of in pulp culture. I remember growing up, there was a lot of stigma, if you're listening to certain kinds of music. Um, and if the other stuff just didn't appeal to you, you just didn't go there. But this idea that we leave it, and then as an adult we come back to it, because it's almost like kind of like a homecoming type of situation. But I do think that this talk really gives us sort of structure, and language to really understand, our experiences with music, growing up, and especially if you're interested in heavy metal music, and neurodivergent, it so many things start to make sense, with a little bit of structure and a little bit of knowledge and explanation. So I really want to thank you for that, and I think that's so invaluable.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yep, and when you go back, you notice a lot of things that you didn't notice at the at the time. You kind of like have your own experiences, and then you realize it's even richer than you than you remembered it. In that sort of way. Yeah. So yeah.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? You can either just kind of wave at the screen, or I think there's only one comment that wanted to be read out loud earlier. But there's a lot of really great vibes here in the discussion. Um, but yeah, if anyone, you can either use the raise hand icon, just waving the screen, or you just jump in and start talking. That's also fine.
I haven't looked at the chat yet at all. Let me open this up. Oh, okay. Sorry.
This was a great talk, John. Thank you so much. The thing is that even before I was diagnosed on the spectrum or even ADHD, which is around 15 years ago, I've always aligned myself with heavy metal and then death metal, and actually before anything else, punk. Never mind the bollocks. I mean, that was one of the first vinyl I bought. My parents didn't know about it for the longest time. I actually hid it from them. Ah! And I managed to see, well, without Joey, but I managed to see the Ramones reunion concert in 2007 with 100,000 of my best friends in Central Park, and it was an amazing concert. Right now, I'm kind of aging, and the knee is starting to give out. I have some problems with my right knee, but the Buzzcocks are coming here in September, and I bought a ticket, added incentive to get my knee back in shape because I want to get out in that mosh pit. Years old and just wiggle my tushy off. So, thank you so much for this. You know what? I'd actually, Roger, I'd actually like it if we could get a group together just to talk about the different musical interests because if there's one thing I've noticed about this group is that we always like to talk about different musical interests that we all have, but I think we really need to get a group together, like even once a month or so, and start talking about our different musical interests just to kind of keep us engaged and keep us interested in the interest of like an autistic culture. I've introduced the group to a bunch of people here in Nova Scotia from Autism Nova Scotia, and they're very interested too. But it's something that I think, I don't know, maybe.
No, no, that is a fantastic idea. I really did not never crossed my mind until John's presentation just to see the amount of uh, connectedness on Zoom, with the chat and even with the head nodding. I mean, it's something I haven't seen before, and I think it's a really great feeling, So uh, I can imagine. I mean, this is to me like the tip of the iceberg, right? So it's almost like you know, as a Zoom community, a virtual community, we're kind of discovering this, and part of I guess Casey in general is stuff like this is that we don't know until we sort of experience it, and we don't can't experience it until we try things, and to this was a very much a very eye-opening experience for me. So I'm totally open to that idea.
Well, the other thing is, remember a couple of months ago when you had on the musicologist who was talking about the different genres of music that seem to attract autistics, and the fact that we seem to be attracted more to either a very heavy beat like John demonstrated, or different cadences or different genres of beat. And I piped up and said, "Yeah, I've got a local artist here who aligns with that." And it turns out he's he's on the spectrum too. He didn't realize it, but his mom went, "Yup, you're definitely on the spectrum." But it's something that I really think this is something I'd be very interested in helping you organize because music for me is my happy place. Now I know there's a lot of neurodivergence. Music is not their happy place and they can't stand it. But for a lot of us, that heavy pulsating beat or some kind of different genre or some kind of different beat, um, I'd definitely be interested in helping out with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for expressing your enthusiasm, and I think we should definitely make that happen. What we've been trying to do is is everyone here on Discord or familiar with Discord? We've been trying to have more of the follow-up discussions on there because Meetup is not that great for sort of ongoing dialogue. So we've been trying to use Discord for that. And I think like a lot of these sort of discoveries and ideas we can sort of flush out on that Discord server.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even know you had one. I'm on Discord all the time. Okay.
So let me see if I can. If you have anyone else have any questions, I'm gonna find the link to the server. Just give me a minute here.
I'll just follow up and I'll say thank you for your comments and I think it's one of the things I think one of the misconceptions is that heavy metal community is very diverse, like just like the neurodiversity community. But I think growing up, you had certain ideas about like metal was like a scene, and it's like certain types of people were metalheads, and and nowadays I think you go and and it's all types. It used to be all dudes, a lot of men, and then it's really diversified um, um, and I really like to see, yeah.
That was something I wanted to ask about, though, is that, like, how much of like, where does the experience of other people who are also drawn to that kind of music fit in it? Like, I'm a goth, and part of that's because I love the goth music, and I love the goth aesthetic, and I love the sound of, like, darkwave music, and I love the, like, synth textures and the emotion and the storytelling. But at the same time, it's also because, like, I know that in any city, I can go to a goth club and just kind of be around people that I'm gonna maybe vibe with a little, and I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like aesthetic stuff like this sort of organizes people.
Yeah. And yeah, and I hope I don't mean to say like that the sensory is always going to be the primary, like what I say, like taste formation is infinitely complex, right? Like, like how one becomes attached to something. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So when I talk about the sort of sensory aspect of metal, that's just kind of like one avenue, one connection you could possibly think of towards that. And you can think about other things as well. I can make the same arguments about EDM music, like having like these really rich pitched I would say textures and pretty simple pounding like rhythms, right? Like it has that sort of same thing. So I'm just trying to call attention to this sensory relationship, but I don't mean to say it like, I never mean to make it like I hope I don't overemphasize it or like make it overly deterministic how the relationship.
Yeah, oh, not at all. I just thought that the two, like, maybe I was curious about how the two fit together. Got me thinking. That's good.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I'm supposed to do things here.
Hi, how's it going? Good, thank you. Hello. Hi, I just wanted to comment on something. I don't know if she's here. I think she left the previous comment, wondering if there was space for a place where I haven't been to any of these. This is my first one, so I don't know what you've done before. But I think she was asking if there's a place where you could do this all the time, kind of what you just did. And I just want to say there is a need for that. Um, we recently had my wife's cousin's years old. His father passed away 2 years ago, and we basically had adopted him. He's now kind of our son, and I've been noticing like we were going to some of these meetups. There's some really good support groups and stuff. And as we were watching them, I'm just kind of going, this is so heavy, like so dark, talking about, all about autism and everything. Um, and then that's all they talk about, all of their issues and difficulties. So I always thought it would be neat to have like a place where you go where you're we we attract a bunch of people who are autistic or have different neurological sorry, I'm still getting used to the lingo and everything, so if I trip over myself, neurological issues, get together and not talk about autism. It's just a welcoming space where we do kind of like what you just did now. It's just, we're just together and we talk about heavy metal music or whatever. And so I've I started a group, and I just want you to know the response from the people who we've connected with, they like it. So if you guys, if this organization or your organization, I don't know if you're part of it, there is space for a place where you just are creative, autistic people getting together and not talking about autism for an hour. Just enjoying themselves. So that's all I wanted to say. There is room for it.
Right, and I should also mention that Dawn Prince-Hughes, who's usually at our presentations, she's our resident autistic anthropologist and the co-founder of CASY. She definitely makes it a point, exactly the point you're making, as this is an autism positive space. So it is exactly for folks um, to feel supported in more of sort of a positive and healing environment versus something that is focused on on deficit. Thank you. Let's see.
Hey, great presentation. Oh my goodness, it is so good to see so many metalheads. And just oh my goodness. So I think that it can be a wonderful combination of both, and the fact that in a world where everything is overstimulating, and oftentimes we don't get to always choose our environment and the things that are overstimulating. Sometimes having music as a way to regulate, as a way to, I definitely was one of those people who kind of fell asleep to metal sometimes, in just in between. And I had heard earlier someone mentioning the when there are within a structure within a system within a society that is not there is no other place in the world, um, in my humble opinion, that is more accepting, open minded, and honestly creative and just such a beautiful community as going to an LGBT club and going to a golf club, followed right by any special interest, special interest convention, any of the. I think that huge festivals like EDC, Coachella, I've never been to them, but I think that there's just such a wonderful experience in sharing together. And I love that in the chat someone had mentioned it's a communal stem between music, between headbanging, between just everything in general. And what I really appreciate about today is just hearing so many different genres over time. And honestly, if there's any way that we can just all share playlists with each other, I think that's just quite a wonderful idea. We actually, I also am with the group and they are starting up a neurodivergent group as well. And a really big part in navigating through, I also am with a specific group within the umbrella for LGBT Asians specifically. And one of the topics that we are working towards is actually talking about neurodivergence in our community. We just talked about mental health last month, and it's really, I think, such a wonderful opportunity to be able to. So many of us have different perspectives, different backgrounds. We all have different experiences, but to have a kind of unified, this is our special interests. These are ways that we're regulating. These are ways that we're stemming, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to not only talk about neurodivergence in a accepting and a curious and a supportive way, but also honoring our humanity. And what better way than to connect with our very special interests? But in general, I hope that overall there are more spaces like this, and there are more conversations like this, and there are more evenings shared with music and joy. And joy is also a form of resistance as well. I think now more than ever, we are in one of the most connected day and ages, yet we are all so disconnected. And having been diagnosed late recently, um, it is kind of on the sense of feeling on the outside looking in. And I did not have a lot of friends growing up. Um, lots of customer service training and lots of kind of just navigating through and special interest in musical theater and just things in general and just studying. But a big part in that is the beauty of neurodiversity and diversity in general. It is just hearing so many different perspectives, and I just want to see more conversations like this. And I really look forward to seeing any and all of your playlists as well. So I wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And just to piggyback on that, um, I think all the lived experience here uh, helps helps we help each other, uh, I guess, assign meaning to past experiences. So um, y- you experience something, and this is sort of going perhaps in the post-humanistic mindset is that not everything is we are not always strict we are not strictly our thoughts and thoughts and feelings. I mean, a lot of things, especially when we're younger, we do things, we don't know why we do them, we don't know why we gravitate towards them. um and then only when we have that, maybe a little bit more information or some knowledge, then we can retrospectively look back. But even that is very that's hard to do, right? But when people share their experiences, there's the stories teach each other about uh about us, and we can absorb that and sort of make sense and give meaning to the things that didn't make sense in the past. Great.
Yeah, I love what you said about, helping each other assign meaning to the things. I mean, as a late diagnosed person, it's like putting together all these pieces. I always think like every autistic person I meet hands me back some shard of myself that like I haven't quite, put into context. And thank you, John, for opening this space. It was really incredible. I had all this stuff come up about like assessing alexithymia as something that I experience now as an adult, and thinking about like little me, like I was in the sixth grade when Headbangers Ballroom came out, and it was like, oh my god, this touches something. Like it was kind of the first sense of in group that I would have, and it was like I think entrainment came up during your talk in such a powerful way. Like, it was, even if I didn't know what to make of what was going on at school, I didn't know how to make sense of any of the social stuff. When you listen to music, like, there was a story there that was very clear on, like, what you felt and the themes of injustice. I mean, I think autistic people on the whole connect with that so much. And so, we were going to find each other in those communities where, like, the rules were more explicit on social engagement, and if you knew a lot about something you were passionate about, that was like a bonus, right? And I see that in autistic community all the time, like, oh, holy crap, these people value digging deep on the stuff you love, and finding a passion community in music. Anyway, I would love to come if you do more talks about anything like this. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Awesome. So I just noticed a bunch of people joined the server. So if you're interested in continuing the discussion, please join us. Or if you have any issues with accessing Discord, or some people don't use Discord, we can certainly we have other means of keeping in touch. So just email me, roger.jou@yale.edu. All right. Great. Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much for this. I must say this is such a great way to end the spring semester for us. It's uh, such a positive note.
Yeah. Well, thank you for hosting, and I'd definitely like to check out the chat, see what everybody was writing about as well. So hopefully see that too. Thank you.
Great. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much again, and you'll have a good night, and we will be in touch. Bye-bye.